You see that? Yeah, I mean that's a world away, but just high school students because they failed the exam. Uh, God is no respecter of persons. Satan isn't either, and that's pressure. Um, it's something that, and so and not on a suicide, but other people do other things too. They slow death. You got people who they don't commit suicide, but their activities, their behaviors are slow death. Or just sort of wasting their time. Uh, so Satan wants to isolate us so he can do things. But I just thought, I mean, we talk about it in America, but it just the idea that in India, uh, it was happening at a very rapid rate. I was reading the news today. Anyway.
We talked about that same in your sermon.
Mm-hmm. And we need to talk about that and other things too, not only suicide, but other stuff, people do that will cause harm to their families or themselves. And that's why people try to vacation and, go places just to calm down and stuff like that. But what happens so often when you come back, you're right where you left. You gotta be able to handle it. Why? If you can find peace, before you go on vacation, you'll have a more peaceful vacation. If you can't find peace before you go on vacation, probably when you get back, it's not going to be that peaceful. But anyway, that's another subject, sort of gloomy. We won't talk about it today. Want to welcome our YouTube people and also our Facebook family. Get you in here. Matthew chapter 14. We said that Matthew's surname was Levi because he probably was a Levite and he probably was a temple worker. The Levites worked in the temple. All the Levites were not priests, but all the priests were Levites. And Matthew wasn't a priest, but he was a temple worker probably. And he saw all the shenanigans that went on in the temple behind the scenes. And he saw what Jesus saw. Remember, Jesus went to the synagogue and he said, this should be a house of prayer. You made a den of thieves. Well, Matthew probably saw that too. And he got disenchanted with the temple and the temple work. And what did he do? He became a tax collector, a gangster, a bank robber. I might as well steal too. Everybody else is stealing. So the priest was stealing, so he started stealing through tax collecting. Of course, he got saved. But in the book of Matthew, more than all other gospel, he really comes down on the priesthood and on the synagogues, and he really pushes the Old Testament. And we think that Matthew was trying to present Jesus as king, the Messiah. Luke presented him as the Son of Man. Mark presented him as a servant, and John presented him as a son of God. So Matthew's theme was the Messiah. Let's see here. We get to this. Chapter 14. We just saw in chapter 13, verse 55, we just saw where Jesus' biological brothers came up to see him. And we see that he has at least 4 brothers: James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. Now we know from church history and from the epistles that James eventually became the leader of the early church, his brother James. And we know that Judas was the brother who wrote a book in the Bible called Jude. He wrote the next to the last book of the Bible. So we know about those two brothers. We don't know about the others. Also, we see that he has sisters. Jesus had biological sisters. These probably were the children of Mary and Joseph. And stuff. Hey, you come see me? Did you come see me? Did you come see me? Okay, I'm with you. Okay. Of Mary and Joseph. Hold on just a minute. I said, did you come to see me? You could Bible study? Yeah. Oh, okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. I didn't want to be presumptuous. All right. Okay, glad. But Mary and Joseph, and probably maybe 3 or 4, who knows how many kids that Mary had after Jesus was born. And it says in verse 57 of chapter 56, this is always family. We just talked about family. And they took offense at him, but Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown. I was telling someone today, they were telling me today, they said, you know, I'm trying to work with some of my family members, brothers, and, you know, stuff like that. And they just don't seem to accept anything that I have to say about the Lord. And I use this scripture. I said, I know it talks about a prophet is not accepting his own hometown, rather. But sometimes, as a child of God, you have opposition within your own family. Amen. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be your town. I said you can use that as that case. So let's get to chapter 14. And at that time, Herod the Tetrarch, that word tetra means 1/4. So the kingdom was divided up into 4. They had 4 Herods, or 4 different parts of the kingdom that Rome let them govern in Palestine. And so Herod was the one who ruled a part of it. Now, this Herod was a son of the Herod that, remember when Jesus was born and at his birth, and the wise man came to see the king and see Herod, and he told the wise men to, when you find him, come back so I can go worship him. And then we are told that the angels told the wise men not to come back to Herod. And so Herod then, so Jesus, the wise men some other place, and Herod sent out his soldiers to kill all the kids under 2 years of age. And Jesus fled to Egypt. And after about 5 years, when Jesus, of about 5 years of age, the Bible says that Herod died. And Joseph and Mary came back. Well, this is his son right here. This is not the short one. The one that in Jesus' time was real short and real mean. This guy was just cynical. He's the one that is at Jesus' crucifixion. His father was at his birth. So this is a different one. And so Herod, I heard the news, and Herod is the one also we're going to see in a minute that had John the Baptist killed. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me read it. And so Herod said to his servant, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. And that is why miraculous powers are at work with him. He has risen from the dead. So Herod thought, when he heard about Jesus, he thought it was John the Baptist. And so Matthew fills us in and tells us why he thought that. So Matthew goes back now and gives us the story. This is a prequel. So we got to find out what's going on. So he goes back and says, when Herod had John arrested, he bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, the wife of his brother. Now, I won't go into all the details, but Herod, this Herod had Antipas, this is his name, Herod Antipas, he had a brother named Philip, and who actually and when they went to Rome, he stole his brother's wife, who actually was his half sister. But let's don't go there. But he stole his brother's wife. He stole his brother's wife. And John the Baptist knew this. And John was a preacher, a fireballer. And so John said some things that got Herodias upset because she knew she had taken advantage of her husband and had to live with another man. So she didn't want anyone to throw her mess out in the streets. What John the Baptist did, because in verse 4, for John had been saying to him, it is not lawful for you to have her. Now, if we read the book of Mark, it tells us that Herod loved to listen to John the Baptist talk. Even though he didn't like him, he loved to listen to him talk. Maybe because he was whatever, who knows? But Herod may have been, and his wife may have known that this guy's having influence on you. You might get saved or something, who knows? And so, although Herod wanted to put him to death, he feared the crowd because they regarded him as a prophet. So Herod wanted to kill John the Baptist because of what he said, but because John the Baptist was so popular, he didn't want to have an uprising. So, as the story goes, verse 6, chapter 14, when Herod's birthday came, the daughter Herodias danced before them and pleased him. Now, her name is not mentioned, but they say her name is Salome. And Herod had all his people there and had a big birthday party. And then we know the story that Herod was infatuated by Salome, Herodias' daughter. He was sort of lusting after her also. And the mom knew this. So he said to her so much that he promised, look at verse 7, with an oath to give her whatever she asked. And having been prompted by her mother, she said, give me here, that word, give me now. Don't waste any time. I want it now. This is what I want now. She said, I want the head of John the Baptist now, like within the next 10 minutes. Because she knew if he had delayed it, he would not have done it. And so she said, give me the head of John the Baptist now. And although he was grieved, the king commanded it to be given because of his oath and because of his dinner guests. So he didn't really want to do what his wife wanted him to do because he had become familiar with John the Baptist. But John the Baptist was beheaded. And when that happened, John the Baptist was beheaded. Look at verse 7. And his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl. And then Salome, the young teenager, gave it to her mom. Here, mom. I wonder how did she present it to him? You never know. To her. But look at what happens next. His disciples took away the body and buried it, and they went and reported it to Jesus. Now, in the Catholic Church, it is said that the Orthodox Greeks have Jesus' head, not the Catholic Church, in the church itself. You got the Greek Church and the Catholic Church. The Greeks have Jesus' head, and the Romans, the Pope has Jesus' body. John, rather. I'm sorry, John. Yeah, not Jesus. I'm sorry, John. Thank you, brother. They have Jesus, John. They have Jesus, John rather. John head, and one had the body.
Catholic Church.
The cat and Orthodox have the Catholic have the head, body, and Orthodox have the head.
Okay.
We don't know, but that's what someone said. I do know that there was a story on History Channel some years ago. They were trying to authenticate a body that they found in a box, and some people said it was John the Baptist's body because it didn't have a head. Now, you don't know whether that's true or not. But yeah, it could have been. You know, you never know. You never know. But I would think that his disciples, verse 12, came and took away the body and buried it. And they went and reported to Jesus. Now look at Jesus' response when he hears about his cousin. Now, you know, Jesus was only about 6 months younger than John the Baptist. So John is now about 33, maybe 34, maybe 33, and Jesus about 32. So they're young, and the Bible doesn't say this, but Mary and Elizabeth were cousins. They may have known each other growing up. We just don't know, because Mary did visit Elizabeth. Remember that? However, whatever the case may be, when Jesus heard the news, his human side comes out. Look at verse 13. And when Jesus heard about John, he withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And he was probably there. It hurts. Everybody knows, Christians know, when a saint dies, they go to heaven. And so when our loved one dies, we know they go to heaven. Jesus knew that John had gone to heaven. But death still what? Hurts. Death still hurts. And so Jesus might have been crying and mourning. So when someone dies, there's nothing wrong with us. You know, if you want to mourn the person, you know, because death hurts, even though you know what's happening. And Jesus definitely knew what happened to John, but death still hurts. And that's something we'll never get used to, death. And Jesus went by a secluded place by himself. Now, of course, as with everything else, when you try to get some privacy, what happens? The phone starts ringing. People start calling. How you doing? What you doing? Yeah, I tell you. And so, and when the people heard that he was by himself, they followed him on foot from the cities. So he didn't get a chance to really mourn as much as he wanted to. Maybe for a day or two, maybe something like that. And then they came. And when he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them, and he healed them. Now, in his sadness, he did not stop what? Caring for people. And sometimes when we have sadness in our lives and things are not going good, we have a tendency to do, you know, some people say, I want a pity party. I just don't want to be bothered with nobody. Just take the phone off the hook, or, you know, I'm putting it, no, we don't have hooks no more. I put it on vibrate, you know, something. But when we are sad, what's happening in the world? There are still some people who are hurting. There are still some people who are hurting. Just because we're sad doesn't mean that they're not the people hurting. And so we should always take the opportunity, even though we are hurting, because one day we will get rest with Jesus. We will have the rest. So Jesus, even though he was obviously shaken up by John's death, very similar in age, he had said before a couple of chapters ago, man is born of woman, there's no one greater than John the Baptist, did he? And so, but he, in verse 14, he went ashore. He said he saw a large crowd. He felt compassion for them, and he healed the sick. And when it was evening, after he had done that, the disciples came to him and said, this desolate place, and the hour is already late. So send the crowds away. Now we're going to see that phrase a few more times. Disciples, when things are going, send them away. Get them away. You know, and they say because there's nothing to eat. Now this is the only miracle that is sure by all four gospels in the Bible. This one right here that we're getting ready to read. All four gospels have this miracle. All the other miracles, 2 gospels have it, 1 gospel have it, 3 gospels have it. But this is the only one in the Bible that has all 4 miracles. And you can sort of figure out why the sermon is coming for Sunday, I think. But they said, send them away. Now we know the story from Book of Mark and Book of Luke that there was a little boy there that had 5 loaves and 3 fish, didn't have 5 fish and what did he have? 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And so that's from the other gospel. We know what was going on. And so it is said, they said, Jesus said to them when they said, it costs too much. We don't have enough money. So send them back home because we can't feed them. Send them away, Jesus. Send them away. And Jesus said, why don't you feed them? And what do they have? They had nothing. They looked around and said, wait a minute. And the only thing they had was, what? 2 fish? 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 loaves and 2 fish that his mother had fixed for that little boy to eat. Yeah, no. It's amazing. 5,000 people and only one little boy thought to bring something to eat. Yeah. Yeah. They said this in verse 17. We have only 5 loaves and 2 fish that probably this little boy mother fixed for him before he left home. And Jesus said to them, bring them to me. Verse 19, ordering the people to sit down on the grass. They said 5,000 men, and not counting the women and children. So it may have been about 10,000 people there. Who knows? He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking to heaven, he blessed the food for they ate. So they had 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. Jesus took it in his hand and he blessed it. Now, you got 10,000 people there. What do? Blessing just that. What does that tell us? Jesus said what basically here? He said grace, didn't he? He said grace. You know what we need to pray? It doesn't matter how much you have. I remember my mother saying one time, she didn't have anything to feed us as kids or something, didn't have any milk or something. And she began to pray over nothing. And somebody came to the door, Brother Doug, and somebody in the neighborhood and brought us something to eat. Yeah. So sometimes when we don't have a little, we shouldn't be complaining about the little we have. We should pray about, thank God for the little we have, and God can turn it into something. Yeah. So somebody that we say sometimes like, I ain't got nothing to eat, you know. Just thank God for what you got and see what might happen. You know, somebody might bring you a dinner or something. I got an invitation from a couple. They may be watching, I don't know. And I'm not saying anything they would say. Invitation from a couple in the church. They invited me to dinner Sunday. Yeah. And if I were to ask, probably 95% people, they probably even know their names. They're so quiet. But
Might be.
y'all shout y'all boy. Y'all invited me 3 years ago. But no, but the point is that, you know, you just don't know where people, you know, where it comes from. It's just out of the blue. So you thank God for what the little you do have. And when Jesus blessed the bread, loaves, he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowd. Now, how in the world, as they gave, it just kept coming. As they gave it, where was it coming from? Yeah, it would have. The more they gave, more came in. So, you know, the more you give, what? More you receive. That's the concept. And if sometimes people, I don't want to give anything. But the more you give, the more you receive. And so they, and And then when they finished, the Bible says this in verse 20, and they ate and were satisfied, and they picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, and they had 12 full baskets of scrap, all left over. And so, and there were about 5,000 men who ate, beside women and children. And so this incident, every gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, recorded this particular miracle. It must have had some kind of impact for them to see how 5,000 people could be fed with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It was amazing. And that's the miracle that God can do it. Now, either God is a great God, or somebody just told us a whopper, isn't it? Yeah, is it? Yeah. So God must be a great God. He can supply your needs when you don't think you can. You don't have much, but if you give thank God for what you have, and He can increase what you need. Yeah. So the thing to do is when you have whatever little bit you have, a couple of dollars, half a sandwich, one pair of shoes, thank God for what you got without complaining, and see what He might do. Thank God, Lord, I got one pair of shoes. Thank you. Thank you. I know y'all can't even conceive of one pair of shoes, but there are some people in the world who only have one pair of shoes. Yeah. Verse 22. Immediately, He made the disciples get into the boat and go to the other side. And he sent the crowds away this time because they were full. And so He told the disciples, get in the boat and go to the other side. Now the Bible tells us when He sent the crowd away and the disciples went into the other side, Jesus went back on the mountain. What maybe? To continue to sorrow for John. He sent the crowds away. He fed them, took care of their needs. Then He told the disciples to go away. So now He's by Himself. And so look at verse 23. And after He had sent the crowds away, he went up to the mountain by Himself to pray. He wanted to continue what? Praying. Right. It was still hurting him what had happened with John the Baptist. But he did his mission. He knew I got a job to do. He did his job. And when they had been fed and He had taught them, He prayed, and it was evening. He was what? Alone. See, back in verse 13, He was trying to be alone, but His task was too great. But now He finished His task, and now he's alone again. And so I would think that people do need some alone time when they're hurting. But that don't mean you don't do what you can do for the Lord. If He could have just said, okay, get out, I'm not coming down. Then he probably wouldn't have enjoyed his alone time as much. So He went back and prayed. And then the disciples on the Galilee, on the river, on the sea rather, rowing the boat. And the Bible says in verse 24, but the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So the disciples was on the boat. Jesus was on the mountaintop. The disciples on the boat. The crowds had gone home. And so now He was alone for a while. Now it's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the disciples going to the other side, rowing, and the winds became contrary. And Jesus was watching them as they were rowing the boat. Now the other gospels say that He was watching them from the mountain, and they are down here rowing the boat. And it say in verse 25, and in the 4th watch of the night, that is 3 o'clock in the morning, He came to them walking on the sea. Now the other gospels say He came to them walking on the sea, but He didn't intend to stop. He just going to keep on walking right on past them. Mark tells us that. But as He was walking on the sea, when the disciples saw Him walking on the sea, they were terrified. and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. So they weren't sure what it was. All they knew is that they were out there and the wind was blowing, the waves were blowing, and they saw this thing walking on the sea, and they said, "Must be a ghost." And Jesus wasn't going to say anything from Mark. He was just going to walk right past them and let them just. To be that late in the morning. Well, the wind was contrary, I guess. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." And when Peter, verse 28, when Peter said to him, "Lord, it is you," he wasn't sure, but said, "Lord, if it's you now, if that's you, let me walk on the water with you." And Jesus said to Peter in verse 29, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat. Now, the other gospel, he got down out of the boat, so a pretty big boat. He got down out of the boat and he walked on the water and came toward Jesus. Now, in all of human history, only two men who have ever walked on the water in recorded history, Jesus and Peter. Yeah. No other writings in human history has included anyone walking on the water except for Peter and Jesus. As Peter began to walk towards Jesus, verse 30, but seeing the wind. How do you see the wind? He didn't see the wind. He saw what? The effects of the wind. He didn't see the wind. Wind is, you can't see wind. When you say, "Boy, it's windy," how do you know? Because of the effects. So he saw the effects, the seas billowing, and he saw the effects, and he saw what it was doing. And when he saw that, he became frightened and began to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." So his attention was taken off Jesus and placed on the effects of what the wind was doing. And when he took his eyes off Jesus, you hear a lot of preachers preach on this, don't you, Brother Evans? When he took his eyes off Jesus, he began to sing. I heard a sermon one time by a preacher named Reverend Gorham. He was a big guy, looked like about 6'5". He weighed about 290 pounds. The Methodist man used to be at New Bethel or somewhere in the Methodist church, real big. And I heard him preach in Sanford one time, Brother Doug, at your brother's church, Reverend Davis Church in Sanford. And he was preaching on when I was trying to figure out what to do. And he said, "If you take your eye off Jesus, you'll fall, you'll sink every time." And that had an impact on my life because I was taking my eye off Jesus. He said, "You take your eye off Jesus," and he was real big. Take your he scared me just being this side. But that was his sermon. If you take your eye off Jesus, you'll sink every time. And what did Peter do? He took his eyes off Jesus and he began to sink. Now, we shouldn't criticize Peter too much. Jesus does, but Peter did have a nerve to do what? Get out the boat. How many of us would have gotten out the boat? If Jesus asked you, "Could you come closer and give me your hand?" So Peter, he had enough faith. I didn't see Matthew get out. Judas didn't get out. Andrew didn't get out. So we could blame Peter for sinking, but he'd had the nerve to get out. So Peter, I'm speaking for you, Peter. And so Peter got out the boat, and he took his eyes off Jesus, verse 30, and he began to sing. And then we have one of the shortest prayers in human history. Look at verse 30. Peter said, "Lord, save me." You don't have to pray long. That's a short prayer, isn't it? "Lord, save me." And immediately when he said that, Jesus did what? Reached out his hand. And so sometimes we think we just got to give tearing, whatever that means, until your knees wear out. Sometimes you just have it in your heart, "Lord, save me." and he was saved. But Jesus chastises him for what he did. Look at verse 31. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, if Peter has little faith, how much do we have? We must don't have very much. He had faith enough to get out the boat. So if he had just a little, how much did other disciples have? Well, it was a pinch. Yeah. How much faith does it take to move a mountain? A little faith. It doesn't take much faith, just a little faith.
Pastor, when I was reading that earlier, I was thinking, he didn't beat him while he was down. He helped him first, and then he beat him.
Good point. Yeah, he pulled him up first, and then after he got him up. And sometimes you're right, Brother Ellis, Brother Edwards. Sometimes people, when you're sinking, they won't help you up there. You should have stayed up. You shouldn't have looked back. Yeah. But he pulled him up first. A very good point. Very good point. Verse 31. And Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said, "You full of faith." And when they got into the boat, the wind stopped. So Jesus has all the answers. Where is it? I think it's. Let's see, which is it? One scripture I want to share. Let me see. Go to Mark chapter 6. I got it here. We go to Mark chapter 6, verse 48. I think that's the one. Mark chapter 6, verse 48. Now, when Mark records Peter walking on the water, Mark doesn't say where he records Peter walking on the water. Look at how Mark phrases it when they were straining at the oars, trying to keep the boat from sinking. Verse 48 says, "Seeing them straining," Jesus was watching them as they were trying to steer the boat. The wind was against them at about the fourth watch of the night. And he came to them walking on the sea, and he intended to do what? Pass by them. Sometimes God said, "You can work it out. You don't need me for this one." Yeah. And so that's interesting. He wasn't even going to stop because he had already told them go to the other side, so they can go. You can make it on your own. Well, he had told them that they were going to the other side, so they should have faith enough that they're going to make it. But I thought it was interesting when Mark says he didn't even intend to stop because he thought they weren't really in trouble. Sometimes we think we're in more trouble than we are, but God is watching. He was watching them, so they weren't in trouble. He had them in the palm of his hand. They just didn't know it. And so God is watching us when we're straining, and he knows that we are not in trouble. But because when you're sleeping at night, who's watching you as you sleep? Who? Yeah, you're sleeping at night. Satan could just get in your house at night and have a field day. I had to bless someone's house one time, and I'm gonna do it another time very soon. But anyway, this person asked me to go over to their house and bless their home. And I know what a housewarming is, so I went over and did that. But then they asked me, they said something. I had to sort of give them a little sermon. They said, "And bless the windows because we don't want Satan to sneak in." and I had to say, it doesn't work that way.
That doesn't sound good.
What is that?
Save your phone.
Yeah. How does that tie? Yeah. Get thee behind me, Satan. Yeah. But a spirit. I mean, it doesn't work that way. That you can bless your windows so Satan can't sneak in.
Well, I have heard the same thing. Someone said that to me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Make sure you do the window so snake don't come through the window.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. See, you know, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, it's the spirit. The spirit. So verse 33, and let's see. Oh, yeah, okay, we can stop. We can go home early tonight. Verse 33, and those who were in the boat worship him. And this is something too. Look at verse 33. When I was reading this, who should be worshiped? Worship the Lord thy God, and only him shall you serve. Who has been worshiped right here? Verse 33. Jesus been worshiped. So that means that Jesus is God, because God is a jealous God. And so this would be a verse for, say, the Jehovah's Witnesses or any other group, the Mormons, or any other group who doesn't think that Jesus is God. They think that he's less than God. And religions too, all the religions, major and minor, they never put Jesus with God. They always say he's a great man, he's a great prophet, he's an angel, but they never say he's God. Or they say he's God, they say he's a lesser God. But that would take away from Jesus' statue if he wasn't God. And that would take away from Christianity, because Jesus is God. Not the Son of God means God, the nature, having the same nature as God. Son of Man means having the same nature as man. Son of God means having the same nature as God. So Jesus is to be worshiped. Only God should be worshiped. And Jesus and the disciples worshiped him, and they said, "You are certainly God's son." Now, even saying that, there's still some doubt in their mind because they're humans, and we'll see that later on. And so when they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And the men of that place recognized him, Jesus, because he had been there before. Remember when he was over there and he had the woman with the issue of blood and all that, and he had been in that area before. So they recognized him, and they sent word into all the surrounding district, and they brought to him all who were sick. And they implored him that they might just touch the hem of his garment. So where did we hear that before? They remember what happened to the woman with the issue of blood. And she had apparently told everybody, all I did was touch his hem of his garment. And all the people said, well, we're going to do the same thing. And they did, and what happened? And as many as touched it, they were cured. They were cured. Anyway, that's our chapter 15. We're going to stop at chapter 15 for tonight and do our questions. I see Andrea, thank you for joining us, my niece. If you want for the Facebook and YouTube fans, if you want the questions, go to New Life Bible Church INC, download the app. New Life Bible Church INC, download the app. All 4 different words, New Life Bible Church INC, and you get the question. Are the questions on there? I have
down there.
down the app. Okay, so we're going to do the question on the app. Question number 1 rather. What were Herod's thoughts of Jesus? Right. Why do you think he thought that?
Because he loved John the Baptist.
That's some of the things Jesus was doing.
Right, he had him killed. And he what now?
He might have been sorrowful.
Yeah. When John was in prison, Herod would love to go talk to John the Baptist, and that might have been the reason. Why was John in prison anyway?
What did he say?
Yeah, a woman scorned. You don't talk about a woman and her misdealings. Yeah, John would say, "Here, you wrong," and maybe Herod was beginning to believe that. But his wife had no. When do you want your gift, Salome? I want it now. What do you want? I want John's head, and I want it now. Did Herod and Herodias disagree concerning JTB, John the Baptist. Did you read Mark chapter 6, verse 20? What did it say? Mark chapter 6, verse 20. Mark chapter 6, verse 20. Someone read Mark. Get the idea.
For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man, and he protected him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly.
And heard him laughing.
Gladly.
Oh, heard him gladly. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Herod loved to hear. And sometimes people that you don't think are good folk, they like to hear good things. Herod loved what John was saying. And his wife knew that. And she didn't like it. The Bible says, and he heard him and he was perplexed. That word probably means he said, maybe John is right. And so when John is killed and Jesus shows up, he's going to immediately think what? John has come back from the dead to haunt me. Yeah. So guilty conscience. Now, in the case of Pontius Pilate, his wife told Pontius what? Leave that man alone. And so sometimes spouses can give you good advice, and sometimes spouses can give you not so good advice. Question number 4. What did Herodias' daughter say to her mom when she gave John the Baptist's head on a platter?
Are you happy now?
No. Y'all don't know what she said? Want me to tell you? Happy Mother's Day.
So Mother's Day and his birthday are the same day.
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
That's not good.
That's cruel. That sounds cruel.
Bring that one back. Bring that one back on Mother's Day week.
Mother's Day.
She handed her mom the head.
Happy Mother's Day. That's just mean. That's mean.
What did your Facebook family say about that?
Maybe she said, "Are you happy now?" That's what she probably should have said. "Are you happy now?"
She was surprised.
Yeah. I don't know. That we shouldn't say that. That's a John is a good guy. I thought everybody would have got that, but since May the 2nd's coming soon.
Mother's Day is the second week in May.
Yes.
We still got a whole
Second Sunday in May.
2 weeks. Not next Sunday. Next Sunday, first Sunday.
Yeah. What did Jesus do when he heard John the Baptist was dead?
He went to a desert place.
Yeah, he wanted to be alone. He wanted to be alone. Wanted to be alone. And when people die, sometimes loved ones want to be. I know I would want to be alone sometimes, but you don't forget that you still are what? You still on the job. As a child, as a child of God, you still have a job. Say if you're a mother or a father, and your spouse or someone, you still have children, don't you? Yeah. And so you may want to be alone, but you have responsibilities, and that's not always easy. That's a difficult thing. Very difficult. Even in his sadness, number 6, rather, even his sadness, what did Jesus continue to do? Verse 14. Show compassion, and he worked. They came for healing, and he fed them, so he continued to work. Yeah. Now, do you think Jesus was rewarded for what he did in his pain? Yeah. And God's going to reward us for what we do in our pain too. Yeah. Question number 7. What did the disciples want Jesus to do? Yeah, send him away. John is dead. You're sad. Send him away. Let them feed for themselves. Yeah, send them away. And so sometimes some people don't quite understand. Question number 8, verse 19. What did Jesus do before his disciples passed out the food? He said grace. He said grace. He said grace. That's what we should always do, is to say grace. Question number 9, verse 23. Why did Jesus send the crowd? Why did Jesus send the crowd away and his disciples away this time? To be alone again, to go back and continue. And when he was alone, the Bible says he often prayed to the Father. So he wasn't alone. He was alone with his God. So he wasn't, up there in the mountain playing, he was alone with his God. So when you're alone with your God. You're just not up there playing something. Question number 10. I think we did this. What had Jesus intended to do as he walked on the water near the disciples? Just passing by. What song does that remind you of? I didn't put that one on. Well, no, no, that's not the one I had in mind. Do not pass me by. I was gospel. Yeah. Y'all went somewhere else. You don't know what my mind is. What was that? My mind is on the gospel. Do not pass me by. Okay, well, anyway, he meant Jesus, do not pass me by. Walk on by. God, Lord have mercy. Woo, y'all was something. Okay, question number 11, verse 28. What did Peter want to know? If it was Jesus. That's what he wanted to know. If it's you now. He didn't know because they thought it was what? He said, if it's you, Jesus, prove it. And verse 30, question number 12. What did Peter really see to cause him to lose faith? The effect of the wind. Sometimes we see things and we think that because of what we see. If you're watching, taking your blood pressure and you see it, it goes up and that'll make you think, the effects of sickness. And we have a tendency to take our eyes off Jesus. But don't lose faith. Question number 13, verse 32. What message is Jesus conveying to us in verse 32? What was Peter most afraid of? The wind effects. And what did Jesus show him? That he had control, Peter. You shouldn't have been afraid. I had it all in the palm of my hand. So he's telling us that he had nothing to worry about. You had nothing to worry about because I can control the wind. All you had to do is say, Jesus, don't save me, stop the wind. Yeah.
You just want to walk on water.
Well, yep. Question number 14, verse 34. What did the disciples do and what revelation did they have? They worshiped him, and what revelation did they have? Son of God. Revelation is something in the Bible, is something new. It wasn't new to the Bible, but it was new to them. The word revelation, it means to unveil. Like if you had a art gallery and somebody has something on top of the art gallery, they take it off to unveil. Or if you are a bride and when the man say kiss the bride or whoever says kiss the bride, you unveil. So that's what the word revelation means. So when they said you the Son of God, that their eyes, the darkness had been unveiled and they could see Jesus, had been unveiled. Question number 15, verse 34 through 36. What memory did the men of Gennesaret have concerning Jesus? They remembered what had happened to her, and they knew that she had done what? Touched the hem of the garment, And that's what they did too. Thank you for tuning us in, and we will talk with you at a later date. God bless you. Let me in Facebook. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for tuning us in.